my thing says 4 p.m. exactly.
Starts at 4 o'clock. Well, we're way past it.
How are you, Mr. Chairman?
This is personally transient. Yeah, let's do that one after 5 o'clock. Limited laundry.
All right, let's get going. Come to order, please. We'll stand. Ms. Sarah, if you'll do the invocation and the pledge.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather here this afternoon and conduct the business of Walton County. We ask that you bless each person here today and their families. We ask also that you guide us and direct us in the decisions that we make that will be for the people that we serve. And all these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to this special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. I ask if you have a telephone or other electronic device, please silence them during the time you're in the room. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we get started. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two items from admin is, first, we would like you to request the board to extend the local state of emergency for an additional 7 days.
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And to that end, of course, we will review this again next week, and as we've done before, if we see fit that in consultation with the chairman to extend it, we'll do that administratively and then ask you to move that forward. The next item, Mr. Chairman, is a request. We approved in January at a regular meeting to advertise for an RFP for a support coordinator for the SHIP program. We've come to find that that is not the appropriate title of the position we need to fill. The appropriate title is the replacement housing strategy sponsor. So we would just like permission to exchange those terms in the RFP, please, sir.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, well, you ain't Mr. Davis. Sid?
I have no items at this time, but I believe I'm going to address the noise ordinance and the roadside fundraising ordinance when they come up.
Go ahead and do this. If you
Oh,
want to
go
ask
ahead and do
that,
this?
yes,
Okay.
please.
I guess number 7, under the legislative items, is the noise ordinance. We're just asking for a motion to continue this to the BCC meeting on June 10th, 2014.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And the next item, number 8 on the legislative items, is roadside fundraising ordinance. We'd ask for a motion to approve that ordinance as well. And I'd be willing to answer any questions that the commission has.
You can ask to approve the ordinance tonight or to continue?
The roadside fundraising ordinance? Tonight.
Okay. You take it up as it comes in order. I thought we were
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Wait on that until we get
Yeah,
to
till you
it.
get to it.
Outstanding. Are we jumping all over it?
Sir,
Okay.
chicken and rice, we
Mess
got-
things up.
Commissioner Meadows, you have anything? I do not. All right. How about Commissioner Commander?
No, sir.
Commissioner Enfield?
No, sir.
Mr. Pridgeon?
No, sir.
Chapman, no. Is there any additional public comments at this time? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Mr. Dias?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have several items on the agenda under legislative and two under quasi-judicial. The two QJ items have to be done after 5 o'clock, so just so we all remember that. The first item on our agenda is number 1, agriculture use ordinance. I'll ask Tim Brown to come forward and give you a brief overview of this proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. Tim Brown with Planning and Development. This is a text amendment to the comprehensive plan to put back, during the ear-based amendments in 2011, they removed agriculture, aquaculture, silviculture activities in rural residential, rural low density, and rural village. And these have historically been agricultural areas because of the rural parts of the county. So there's people that have always had agricultural uses and always expected to have agricultural uses. Well, they removed those uses in 2011, so we're putting it back, word for word, what was in the previous comprehensive plan. Now, there is one section where it talks about these uses may occupy up to 5% of the total land area designated rural residential, rural low density, and rural village. Well, the Planning Commission, when they recommended approving it, recommended taking that out, leaving all the other language, but taking that out. They felt there was no reason to limit it to 5%. I mean, you consider how many acres of each of these categories. So that's the recommendation. But we're just trying to put back what was previously there with this amendment.
Yeah, the 5%, yeah, I tend to agree with taking it out because it's of the total land use area designated as RR. So you have to do an accounting of how much RR you have, and then you have to keep track of how much commercial each RR has. And it's
very hard to enforce. I mean, we can do it with the GIS, but it's really time
consuming for you guys.
and,
Yeah,
and,
to
and,
keep
and
track of it.
difficult to keep track of all that.
I mean, I guess they couldn't do the whole site as commercial, could they?
No, it says neighborhood commercial can only occupy 5% of the
site.
of the site.
Okay.
Is there any public comments concerning this? Seeing none, any other questions from the board, entertain a motion.
I would move that we adopt the
It's a motion to transmit.
transmit. I would move that
This
we.
one?
It's first reading.
First
Set a second public hearing.
Okay. So
There's a comp plan.
the motion would be to.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's right.
This is
I'm sorry.
motion to
I'm sorry.
transmit to DEO.
Okay.
I'm sorry. This is a transmittal hearing. I was thinking
Okay.
of the LDC. This is a transmittal hearing.
Okay. Okay. So I would move that we transmit it, but I would delete number 4 under each. Well, it's not number 4 under each thing. It's a different number under each category. But I would delete the part about the 5% of the total land use area.
No, this one is 3.
Okay.
Yeah. Look under
On page
rural
3, it's
village.
on-
Yeah, it's all over the place. So
Second.
that would be my motion.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, number 2 on the agenda is a amendment to the Walton County Land Development Code to be consistent with the comprehensive plan regarding limited lodging ordinance. I asked Mr. Matt Carpenter to come up and give a brief overview of this project.
Thank you, Commissioners. Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department. The limited lodging ordinance, the purpose of this ordinance is to merely bring the land development code in sync with the changes made to the comprehensive plan in March of 2011. And all we're changing is we're increasing the maximum number of rooms in limited lodging from the present 75 in the Land Development Code to match the 125 in the comprehensive plan. That's all this ordinance does. This is a first reading of an ordinance to amend the Land Development Code, and we would recommend that you set an adoption hearing, if it be your pleasure, for June 10th, 2014 at the South Walton Annex at 5 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comments? Seeing none, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Commissioners, our next item, number 3, is the US 98-331 Scenic Quarter Outdoor Display Ordinance. And this is specifically limited to the US 98 Scenic Quarter and that portion of 331 that is south of the Choctawhatchee Bay. And you may recall that this has been before you for authorization before. Presently, there is no opportunity for outside display of merchandise in an unscreened manner on US 98. That's not the condition we have out there at the moment for the reasons that we're all aware of. But this would allow up to 120 square feet of unscreened outdoor display permitted through an outdoor display permit approved by the Design Review Board. And in your package, there is a diagram of the typical limits of that outdoor display area. We worked very closely with the Scenic Quarter Association and members of the business community along US 98 to craft something that would provide some level of relief, but would still meet the intent of the US 98 Scenic Quarter to reduce roadside clutter. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about it. And again, this would be a first reading and a set of a second reading public hearing.
Yeah, Mac, would they have to hire? Oh, wait.
Yes, and finally, we do have a unanimous approval from the DRB and the Planning Commission on the ordinance that is before you.
Okay. So it says a dimension site plan drawn to scale. It doesn't have to be done by an engineer or it can just
No, it can be
submitted?
done by a lay person providing it's properly dimensioned.
Okay.
Because that is the integral part of the permitting process, the actual space,
Right.
and the location from the front door of the store, and you're required to keep a clear path for ADA accessibility.
Mac, you talking about, is it going to be adjacent to the building, or is it going to be out like it, I see here,
This is
gas pumps are not, it's in here.
Yeah, we have.
Is it going to be
We have
stuff
some
moved out to
specific
the gas-
exceptions, but this display area would be adjacent to the facade of the
It's
business.
not out to the gas pumps like you see
It's
stuff
not
on the
out by
island.
the roadside.
Okay.
It is adjacent to the face of the building where the business resides.
Another question too. Under number 7, it says the use of boxes, crates, pallets, other kind of shipping is prohibited. You know, you see a lot of those floats and stuff contained within a corral or something. Is that?
I think a corral type
Is that
device would be allowable. I think what we're talking about here are regular shipping pallets, just raw wood kind of pallets that might
Okay.
appear out there otherwise if we don't restrict that kind of appearance.
It's
I
a
mean,
finished
the intent is
enclosure.
to have and
Yeah, I'm sorry. If it's a finished enclosure where it's nicely done, finished enclosure that's designed for that purpose, that would be allowed.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions from the board?
thank you.
Is any public comment?
You've seen the typical diagram.
Yes. Ms. Nielsen, if you will, state your name for the record.
My name is Mary Nielsen for the record. I hope that this is going to be officially and wholeheartedly enforced. If you pass it, you've passed many things. Previous boards for the last 15 years have passed numerous ordinances, none of which have been, for the most part, enforced. So it's been kind of like a wink, wink, and a nod. We'll do the ordinance, but it never gets enforced. And we know that it hasn't been enforced previously because we see everything out there on 98, and we've all seen it, you've seen it, and everybody's seen it. So now you're legitimizing some form of it if you pass this. I would like your verbal commitment publicly on the record that you will do everything in your power to see that code enforcement does their job. If you choose to pass this. I really would like you to. And I'd like some form of public announcement, not just a little blurb on your website, but some form of advertised public announcement, if this is voted upon tonight, to give the approval for this, in the newspapers, or some form of saying that you must comply with this from going forward, so that we take in all the tables and chairs and mattresses and beds and everything from Haven House all the way up and down the road on each side of Haven House, to the east and to the west, and that stuff is removed from our scenic corridor. Because otherwise, we're just fooling everybody if we continue to call it a scenic corridor. Thank you.
Mr. Dice?
Just wanted to tell Ms. Nielsen that we certainly will enforce this. This is very detailed. I think we drafted this way to close up any loose ends. I know before there had been some loose ends that were sort of exploited, I would say, I guess, that made it somewhat difficult to enforce some portions of it. We feel like this closes those gaps, closes the loose ends. We will provide training for code enforcement, and I can assure you that they will be enforced.
Just, if I may add, Mr. Chairman, and Wayne can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you recall, we've recently added a code enforcement officer to our staff, and either exclusively or primarily that officer is monitoring scenic corridor.
That is exactly right, and Larry's right. We have added a new code enforcement officer, and that person will be primarily dedicated to the scenic corridor. That to be his primary purpose. He will do other things, but I think the key thing is it's drafted in such a way that I think we close the loose ends. Mac provided the diagram, which I believe is always very good for purposes of showing potential business owners how they can display their merchandise. We feel like it's a pretty tight process, and it'll make it our job easier to administer from the standpoint of compliance.
I have a question. I have a question to Wayne and Mac too. How are y'all going to start? I mean, how are y'all going to introduce this to the businesses? Are you going to go business by business, or how are you going to do that?
You know, I think most of them are aware of this process. This has been going through a process for several 6 months or more now, and what we will likely do, and we had this discussion previously with Jason Catalano and J.C. Alford, we will probably do some series of notifications to the business owners, a warning, and then if we don't have compliance, then we'll take the normal steps we have for code compliance, code enforcement. And we do have the citations now that are available as well. So,
okay.
Mac, did you have any further comments?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to point out that there's another provision that we included in this to deal with other types of outside display, and specifically seasonal holiday displays, pumpkin patches, and Christmas tree lots. As you know, we've struggled with whether or not to allow those and where to allow those over the last 10, 15 years since the scenic corridor was produced. And technically, whether you have a live Christmas tree that's cut down or a dead Christmas tree that used to be alive, depending on whether you're the vendor or the county, that may or may not be allowed. So we took the opportunity to actually legalize Christmas tree lots by temporary use permit and pumpkin patches also to respond to the public's desire to have those and our need to be able to properly regulate those to reduce the load on code enforcement. So that is in here also, and that will help code enforcement, and I think the public also.
Okay.
Gotta buy a Christmas tree.
Ma'am, come forward, please. State your name for the record.
Well, she's kind of just asked for one point of clarity. Did I understand that the design review board will be the ones to approve the applications?
the site plans will come through. I believe they are part of the approval process. Design.
Yes.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
And I think the beneficial thing is they have to get a site plan approved. They bring us a site plan that's approved, showing the dimensions, showing how they can comply. So it will be easy for our code enforcement people to go out, take that site plan compared to what's on the ground. That's the beauty of I think, the site plan approval process.
Ma'am, state your name for the record, please.
Sandra Luchtefeld. I'd like to mention that lots of times we are told it's a training issue. It's a training issue. And that's why we haven't been able to enforce it, because it's a training issue. So if we could put some of the emphasis for training with the Chamber of Commerce and the Tourist Development Council for training these businesses on how to keep our scenic highways straight, then that helps separate that training from the enforcement so that code enforcement can totally concentrate on enforcement.
Okay, thank you. Wayne, you want to?
That's an excellent idea. We will reach out to those entities that do involve the business owners and provide them information as well, because anything we can do to make that process easier for the business owner, we're willing to do, and we will certainly reach out to the different entities out there that do interact with the business owners.
Okay. Thank somebody else. Dottie, Ms. Leah. Ms. Moore, state your name for the record.
Sure. Lee Moore, and I'm representing the Scenic Corridor Association, and we do feel like this is a good compromise. This has been worked on long and hard, as you all know. You've been watching it go through the process, and so with the limitations and parameters that are here, we feel like it's well written, and that will be, as Max said, in keeping with the Scenic Corridor. We would prefer that you stay with the maximum height of 7 feet versus the 8 feet that the Planning Commission suggested. That the 7 feet is what the DRB approved and what the group that worked on this between the businesses and the SCA came up with originally. But we do feel good about this, and hope you will too.
Thank you.
Isn't the extension in height because of the red boxes? I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, that was the recommendation. The red boxes are typically 7.5 feet, and the Planning Commission recommended 8 feet to make sure that they wanted that within this outdoor display area,
Right.
and they wanted to make sure that it fit.
Okay. Sir, come forward, state your name. I'm sorry, Dottie. Dottie, come forward. State your name for the record, please.
Dottie Mist. Thank you. Am I right in assuming that this ordinance will be one of them that's proactively enforced rather than just by complaints?
I think what I heard from Mac and Wayne is that this new code enforcement officer is primarily responsible for the scenic corridors along with some other ancillary duties.
Yes, sir, we will proactively enforce this, and we've got something that is clear. It's clear for the public, clear for the business owners, and most importantly, is from an enforcement standpoint, clear for our staff. And we think it's something we can work with.
Thank you. Sir, did you want to make a statement? State your name for the record.
My name is Tom Waldrop. I own the electric car company that is within the scenic corridor, along with a couple of my sons. We've been dealing with this issue, Max said 6 months. We've been dealing with it for 6 years. We have enjoyed the opportunity to work with the Scenic Corridor Group. We think that this is a reasonable compromise that gives businesses at least an opportunity to work within some sort of framework to display merchandise. They can establish their priorities, what they need to display. They know how much room they've got to display it in based on how much space they have and what they're displaying. And we just think it's very reasonable. We have to start somewhere. Obviously, there are a lot of us that hate to be legislated to death. But we feel like this is palatable. Not every business owner is going to agree with it, but nobody else is either. So I just want to commend y'all and thank you for the attention you've given us for the last year in dealing with this.
All right, thank you, sir. Any other comments? Seeing none, what's the board's wishes?
Motion to move to June 10th meeting? Is that correct? Or we got motion to recommend approval or denial?
Motion to approve and set the first reading and set a adoption hearing for June 10th at 4 o'clock, or 5 o'clock at this location.
What he said.
Such a
Second.
motion. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next three items on your agenda deal with sandwich boards for different areas of the county. The first one is number 4, which deals with sandwich boards for US 98 and 331. I'll ask Tim Brown to come up and give you an overview of what this item's about, and then obviously the next two will be related to this as well.
Thank you, Tim Brown, for the record. These are board-directed ordinances, staff was directed, so we split them up because the Design Review Board looks at 331-98, so we did that. Then we have the other scenic corridors, 38 and Scenic Gulf Drive, so that's a separate ordinance. Then the rest of the unincorporated area that are outside of the scenic corridors, so that's the third ordinance. Now this fourth, all the regulations are the same in all three ordinances. They're exactly the same. The 98 one, both the Design Review Board and the Planning Commission recommended not to approve it. One of the biggest issues was speed. Some parts of 98 are 65 miles per hour, some are 55, and you just don't really have an opportunity to read the sign. You're going so fast that you'll never be able to see it in time. So I'll answer any questions, but in terms of this ordinance, both of those boards recommend not to approve it.
You know, I tend to agree. One thing, you're traveling 65 miles an hour and you take your eyes off the road to look at a sign, you know, I'm on the side of the road. So I think what the speed limit gives, it's just limited. I just don't think, I've never felt like it was a good idea on 98.
What about, I have a question. What about the businesses like the strip malls that have, they have big sidewalks out in front of their stores, and there are some people I've noticed that will put out, a sandwich board sign. It's in the plaza, it's somewhere near their store. Would those be allowed?
No. If this ordinance is denied, if they're fronting on 98, then they're in the scenic corridor. So, it's currently not allowed, and if this ordinance is not approved, it's still going to be not allowed.
Yeah, is this...
this one is strictly 98-331.
Right, okay, and the next one's 38, Scenic Gulf. Okay, yeah, that's the only thing you can't really see them from the road anyway, but if they're on the person's property and you have a huge parking lot, let's say, for instance, the mall where the electric carts are, they've got the retail and everything, and there's like 3 or 4 stores in there. If they want to,
Grand Boulevard might be a good example because of the buildings fronting the road. You've got those other buildings behind. You can't actually see it from the road,
right.
But that's more pedestrian back there.
Right.
So you could have some sandwich board
You
signs
could.
back there, and you'd never know it. You wouldn't
Yeah.
see them from 98.
yeah, but I would doubt you would see them from 98 if they were in like that retail plaza there.
That set's pretty far back, so you may not see them.
That would be my only thing is, I don't have a big issue with them being outside of business if they want to put a sign out that says special 50% off or whatever.
And Commissioner, the next item you'll see in Tim's report, the Planning Commission wished to strike the 150 linear feet separation on the front for the strip malls, and I think they chose to only allow them
one per storefront.
One per storefront. So within 20 feet of the front door. So that may be a good compromise in this situation if there is some concern about eliminating all the sandwich board signs.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. I would have to want to go into that shopping center or something, and then I would see the
Yeah, then you'd see the sandwich board sign. I just driving around looking, I did notice that some of these little stores in these centers would have a sandwich board sign outside. Maybe it was 10 feet from their front door, and it would say, whatever. As long as they're not on 98 in the right of way or the.
Couldn't we get Mac and to work on something, bring it back to us to review?
We can certainly take that back to the design review board and see if they would, what they would like to recommend with, in that particular context where it's not out near the right of way and it's in a shopping center.
Well, that's kind of in line with Commissioner Meadows, the way I look at it. You got some that are at least 100+ feet off the highway, and it's in a strip mall. And if I understand this correctly, that would be prohibited based upon what is presently written in the draft.
Yes.
They're prohibited now.
If it's fronting 98, it's going to be prohibited.
Right, but these businesses, whatever they may be, sandwich shop, padrones, whatever, I don't see an issue with it being right outside their front door if they wanted to put a sandwich board there. Now,
No.
maybe not out there on the 98 part of it, but.
Now, what we just did was we gave them 120 square feet for outdoor display of merchandise. So that's going to, I expect most folks are going to take advantage of that and are going to sort of fill up their storefront with display of merchandise.
But it's going to be according to what kind of business it is.
That's right.
Yeah,
And
that's going to be the main issue.
And we've got folks that are very close to 98, and we got folks that are almost 400 feet back from 98. But we'll be happy to propose something and take it to the Planning Commission if that be the will of this body.
I mean, yeah, for example,
I mean, Design Review Board and Planning Commission.
Do you have to send it back? Why can't we just say, we like it for everything but outside a storefront in a mall, in a strip plaza?
But I think that needs to be real clear. You know, what we call it, make sure we got it clear of what we're understanding. I mean, I'm for doing what, if we want to do it.
But I think Commissioner Meadows' language is clear.
Okay, as long as it's.
Because it says total sign area, then you got with location, then you got placement.
Well, you might do 10 feet from the front instead of 20.
Because in here it says, no further than 20 feet from the entrance of the building.
you said 10 feet.
And then one per storefront instead of one per every 150 linear feet?
Yeah,
One per storefront.
yeah. Yeah. And then, and basically it says, you can't have one within the, you can't have one on 98. You can't, you can't put it out in front of the plaza, because most plazas have parking. They have landscape buffer, and then they have parking.
Yeah, in front.
Yes, ma'am. I think the simple limitation of having it within 20 feet of the front door will limit all the other ones that are maybe on a roadway that's 400 feet from the actual store.
Yeah, and
So
that gives them.
If the board did want to move forward, that may be the main portion is that, because I believe the next item, the Planning Commission actually made that recommendation.
Okay.
To strike the 150 linear feet.
Yeah, they did.
And then just go with the 20 feet from the front door.
Yeah, that would be
But
my
they were talking about
motion.
10, doing 10.
Either way, I mean, I think the intent of that is having it near the door, if there's a awning or a sidewalk, what have you, so you can place it out there, but
Yeah.
not place it in a place that's going to be
Right.
cluttered.
No further than 10 feet from the entrance of the business, and then strike the one for every 100 feet and just 150 feet and say one for every business if they, not everybody's going to do it because,
One per storefront is what the Planning Commission recommended, which
Yeah.
would be each tenant in the
Yeah.
strip center.
Can have one.
yeah,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
could have one.
yeah.
I second her motion.
I third her motion.
Any public comment? Yes, ma'am, come forward, state your name.
My name's Mary Konoski, and I'm here representing the South Walton Community Council. And the South Walton, I'd like to read and then try to explain some of the positions of the South Walton Community Council. We support the current sign ordinance provisions in the Land Development Code, and therefore oppose amending either Chapter 7, and in this case, Chapter 13, to include permitting sandwich signs in Walton County. And we have several reasons, and I'll try to be brief. The first one is enforcement. And at a earlier BCC meeting on April 22nd, you all discussed at that meeting as enforceability being a necessary standard for any ordinances that you would pass. And with the time constraints and the number of businesses that might display. For example, outdoor displays are going to be there all the time, but sandwich signs are to come in and out. And so the enforcement of that we see as not impossible, but certainly a burden on code enforcement, and a burden not because they're not competent or not because there are not enough code enforcement officers, but a burden because of the design of the ordinance. The second thing we object to is that sandwich signs increase the appearance of clutter, and that therefore this goes especially against the intent of the scenic corridors, for example, the 98-331 scenic corridor. So we see this as an ordinance that goes against the intent of Chapter 13. And the third point, we believe that there is not clear definition of some of the key terms in the ordinance, especially the definition of what is a business. So in the absence of a business license in our county, you have to ask, what is a business? So is a business simply a storefront, or is someone who's renting property on 30A, or in this case, Highway 98, a business, and therefore subject to this ordinance? The fourth objection we have is that it's going to take a lot of effort to educate business owners about accurate site distance requirements. This might not apply so much to this ordinance if you amend it to only be within strip malls, but it would apply to the other ordinances that are coming up. And by the way, I'm only going to speak once, but my comments apply to each of these ordinances that apply to South Walton County. The fifth is especially on the roadways and the sidewalks, the hazards that'll be created for bicyclists and pedestrians as they're trying. I can see in again, this isn't 30A, but when you come to 30A, I can see in 30A, a cluster of sandwich signs down the sidewalk that are also being used by pedestrians and by bicyclists, and the danger to the public when those sandwich signs start cluttering that walkway. And the sixth objection we have is the lack of clarity of who's liable for any accidents that do happen as a result of sandwich signs, either involving motorists, pedestrians, or bicyclists. And then I'd just like to remind you all that in the case of the particular ordinance you're addressing now, the Design Review Board and the Planning Commission recommended not to pass this ordinance on that scenic corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments? Sir, step forward, please. State your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Ebeke. I live in Santa Rosa Beach, and I represent St. Rita Parish. Everyone knows where St. Rita Church is, except the 6,000 visitors that come to visit us on Easter Sunday. We need some relief. We have sandwich board signs. It's certainly not the answer, but we need some representative type of sign so that people can find our church. We have young people with young families coming in apologizing to me when I'm an usher that they're a half an hour late for Mass because they couldn't find the church. I think it's appalling. Thank you very much for your time.
Could I address could I just say, I have been working with Joe Stanko ever since this issue started. There is a program called Todd's Tourist-Oriented Directional Signs that the FDOT has, and I'm trying to work with them. It's a process that we have to go through, and when we get, then I'll bring it to the board and see what they think, and that may be the answer to St. Rita's problem. We're looking at trying to do that.
And as you know, St. Rita Church is at least 500 feet off of 98. Yeah. It cannot be seen.
Do you
thank you very much for your interest, and thank you.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think people, that visitors coming, do you think they're just driving around looking for a church to go to, or
no, not at all?
Are they specifically looking for St. Rita's?
I'll tell you why that's negated. Is that many of the people that return here, last year there were signs, and they drive by, as you said, at 55 miles an hour, and they'll say, wasn't that the road? No, the sign is not there. The signs have been repeatedly taken down, maybe justifiably by the code enforcement, but nonetheless, there are no signs. For a while, we had a small sign, about so big, under the road sign that said St. Rita Church, readily visible, and they could turn at that. But the fact of the matter is that they don't always come down the same year, they don't always come down at the same time, but there are thousands of them.
Right. But what we're seeing is people are on their iPhones or their iPads, and they're looking up St. Rita Church, and they're getting either a GPS or a direction
I
there.
agree, except for
Yeah.
senior citizens who don't know how to use an iPhone.
Yeah.
Okay? And many,
Yeah.
many snowbirds that come into our area. And I can tell you just recently, I went down to Tampa, and I was looking for a facility south of Tampa, and I put the coordinates in and the name of the town, and it took me 10 miles off. So, you know, it's not a foolproof system, for sure. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Mac?
Mac, you want to give more information than I just did?
Yes, we did meet Public Works and myself and Commissioner Commander, and I know she's been working on this for some time now, to try to come up with some signage to replace our community directory signs that DOT was kind enough to take away from us. We think there may be some opportunity for that concept to come back on a limited basis, whether it be through the tourist-oriented directional sign program or some opportunity to reinstate our community directory signs on a more limited basis. But Buddy Wright and I are working with Commissioner Commander to try to come up with a solution, and St. Rita's Catholic Church was certainly one of the primary entities that we were discussing.
St. Rita's, Walton County owns that front parcel there that we have everything on. We've got a sign there at Helen McCall. I don't know why we couldn't give them an easement for a sign on our property.
And I had discussed that with Public Works, and
Yeah.
Buddy isn't here. And Buddy kind of said, well, then do we do it for the next church that's down the road that maybe is off? So they we're trying. He was trying to solve it.
Yeah,
I asked that
if we had a piece of property on the corner,
Yeah.
we could accommodate people. But if we didn't, but that would be one solution to this, because we do have the property there.
And maybe we could do it temporarily until we do get a overall fix for it.
Yeah.
So I'll hit Buddy up. Matt, will you hit Buddy up again?
We'll see if we can come up with something that fits with
Yeah.
the state statute and our code and the problem we need to address.
Yeah.
I did have one suggestion on the sandwich board signs in the US 98 corridor. I mean, if it's the board's wishes to consider some of those, like on the arcade in front of a business in the shopping center, we could include them in this outdoor display area.
Yeah, that's true. Can y'all define business? Can you put that in your definitions?
We can, sure.
Yeah.
Wouldn't a business be something that sold a product or a service?
Yeah, selling product services is a general definition of it.
Yeah. But it's not in the definitions, and I guess someone could
Ms.
put one
Moore?
outside their house or something.
What would they be advertising?
I think it's Lee Moore, and again, representing Scenic Corridor Association. I think that the concern about the definition of a business is that if every rental home, this is not as much of an application for 98, but it's hard to talk about one of these without talking about all of them or some of them. On 30A or Scenic Gulf Drive, that could become even more signage. And I also think about some of the areas like the strip center, or I don't know what you call it, but the center in Seacrest. I think that was part of an earlier exhibit when this came up before, and there are all those little kiosk businesses around the inside of that as well. So it just adds to the number of signs in a confined location. So I think that's the concern about the definition of a business, besides just being clear about it in the ordinance. And I would say, for the Scenic Corridor Association, in the interest of your time, we echo everything that the South Walton Community Council said tonight. I don't want to go through it all again because for the sake of time, but we echo everything about that. We're trying to limit clutter, not increase it, and we feel like this will. And when we talk about, I get the whole concept of businesses that are back in these centers and off the road, but as you travel 98, some of the businesses are pretty far offset, but a lot of them are right up on the roadway, like in the Inlet Beach area and Miramar Beach. You know, I think about 30 Avenue, the new development going in Inlet Beach. They'll have quite a few storefronts along 98, and they're very close to the road. So if there are a lot of signs out there, it will be visible from 98. And in Miramar Beach, of course, there are a lot of businesses that are up close to 98. So that's what concerns me is, you know, how do you define it? Now, one way that it's a similar thing is defined in elsewhere in Chapter 13 is if something is visible from the roadway or not. So I throw that out as a suggestion to say maybe if it's not visible from the roadway for some of these centers that have multiple businesses back and it's more of a pedestrian issue once you're in the center, that might be a possibility. I just thought about that when I was sitting there and wanted to throw that out. You know, and I know that one sandwich board sign may not seem like an issue, but when we talk about the number of businesses in South Walton County, we're talking about thousands of businesses. And so it does become quite a number of signs if only half of those businesses decide to take advantage of this. And the other thing I want to mention, a little bit off the subject, but you were talking about the community signs and directional signage on 98. I would just respectfully request that when things start getting to a point where those are being designed or planned for and it's getting to a later point where it's actually being looked at harder, the Scenic Corridor Association would love to have the opportunity to give some input in that design process, just, you know, to just have some input in it. That'd be great because we were involved before when there was some consideration for changing those signs and using the blue signs that were going to be repurposed and all of that. So we'd love to be involved in that process. But the Scenic Corridor Association just would encourage you to concur with the Design Review Board and the Planning Commission and deny this for US 98. Thank you for your time.
Wayne?
Mr. Chairman, as it relates to the definition of business in the Land Development Code, Section 110701, it defines business as, it says, business shall mean all activities, trades, occupation, calling, vocation, or professions engaged in, conducted, advertised, carried on, or held out to the public to be a business for the purposes of gain or economic benefit. Business shall not include the following: agriculture or silviculture uses, roadside and beach vending, home occupations as defined in the Land Development Code, and residential long-term and short-term rentals. So we already have a current definition in the code.
Okay. Ms. Nielsen?
Mary Nielsen, what Wayne just read presents you with a very serious conflict of interest regarding businesses and short-term rentals. All the short-term rentals per Florida statutes who collect sales tax and bed taxes are considered businesses, I believe, unless that statute was recently changed under the wording, the verbiage of the Florida statutes. Therefore, each of them have the right under that, they are considered a business. Just imagine 30A with all those houses and condos with sandwich board signs from end to end of 30A, and some of them have a 40-foot wide or less driveway that abuts 30A that they drive down to their Gulfront lot, but there's another facility that sits immediately behind them on that same property but has a separate driveway on 30A. So you might have one long lot, but they're stacked. Some of them 2 and 3 feet deep, but if they have that easement or that side driveway offset, you could have a sandwich board sign on a small 12-foot, 15-foot driveway, and immediately adjacent to it, you could have another sandwich board sign sitting there for the units on the back. And if each of them are separately owned, you might have 4 or 5 within a 20-foot driveway distance stacked up next to each other, because each of them are a legitimate business on Florida statutes for bed tax collectors. So I think our code language that Wayne just read and the Florida statutes, we've got a serious conflict, and 30A will look like beyond one's comprehension of unclassy. Thank you.
Wayne?
Chairman, just to go back to what we said a minute ago, the current Walton County Land Development Code says that a short-term or long-term rental shall not be considered a business. Florida statutes is one thing, Land Development Code's different, I believe. I don't see that presents a conflict.
Well, and for purposes of this ordinance, the definition that would control would be what is in the Land Development Code, not in the Florida statutes.
Okay. One thing I wanted to mention, let's take Silver Sands, for example. It's in the corridor. And as everybody's been there any length of time knows that it's a lot of businesses out there several hundred feet away. And as of right now, they couldn't put a sandwich sign out there in front of their business to advertise a sale. Am I correct on that, Mac?
If their business is not, if their storefront and their signs are not visible from a public roadway or residential parcel, they are exempt from permitting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other public comments? What's the board's wishes?
You've got a motion with a second on the floor.
Oh, I do. That's right, I'm sorry.
What was it? You made a motion to limit the thing to
10 feet.
To 10 feet.
Okay, well, I suggested that we allow sandwich board signs in these businesses that they could not put a sandwich board sign out on 98, but they could put one 10 feet from their door if they so choose.
And this is on scenic 98 only.
And this is on 98 and 331.
331.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And I think as part of that, we talked about not the 100, strike the 150 feet.
One per storefront.
Right.
Okay, the next one is in the 30A Scenic Gulf Drive Scenic Corridors. Again, the standards are the same. The recommendation from the Planning Commission was to approve it, and I think they were more inclined because of the lower speed limits on those roads, and to strike the 150 limitation and say one per storefront. They didn't really talk too much about 10 feet as opposed to 20. Right now it says 20 feet from the front door of your business. So that's something you might want to look at. But I mean, that's where we're at here. They did pass it with that caveat that it would be one per storefront.
And I've got a question. I know the last one dealt with US 98, but the comments that Mrs. Nielsen made, how do we address something like that that would keep them from having just a whole series of sandwich boards for those properties?
Well, she was mostly referring to rentals under that definition that Wayne read. Those would be exempt, but where you do have, I mean, there are a lot of back-to-back businesses along 38. Each one of those could have one within, well, the way it reads now, within 20 feet of their front door. Because it says one per storefront. So if there's more than one, I mean, some of those, you have 3 or 4 in one little strip center, like the Donut Hut and Rent Gear here. I mean, each one of those could have a sandwich board sign.
And also, we did include language in the draft that does prohibit their placement where it blocks vehicular traffic and views and those kind of things. So there are some safety mechanisms built into the draft that you have. Quite frankly, I think some of the larger strip malls, larger malls or plazas, they usually have their own restrictions and covenants, and many times you won't see them there anyway because they'll be disallowed by the owner of the manager of the mall or plaza.
Yeah, I thought we talked about last time, like if you've got a building and it has a series of businesses in it, that they would get one sandwich board sign, and they would determine among themselves whose sandwich board sign was out that day if they.
Yeah, that's what the current language, the 1 per 150. So they're limited by that. So if that's 4 and there's 10 businesses in there, they have to decide amongst themselves who's going to get those 4 signs.
Okay.
That is never going to happen. First of all, you're gonna have, let's say neighbor fighting neighbor, or, business fighting business, number one. No, my sign goes out, no, yours doesn't. Mine was there last week, no, you're mine, And also, I don't even feel like that I want to consider Scenic Gulf Drive. The businesses are so close together and they're so close to the road, and I have heard nothing but opposition from everybody that I, deal with. Part of my district's on Scenic Gulf, part Cindy's, and I've heard no one on Scenic Gulf Drive that wants sandwich boards on Scenic Gulf Drive. I don't know how we solve the problem. To me, I can see you're going to get on 30A. It's going to be a cluster of signs. I'd like to see some, but I don't know how we do it. What, did you draw a lottery?
Well, the point you just made is why the Planning Commission recommended deleting that 150, because you're going to get people that just aren't going to agree. They're just not going to agree.
But still, you're going to have on 30A a sign in front of every business?
Potentially,
that's still...
But from a code enforcement standpoint, if I could, Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department, any code enforcement action would be taken against the property owner, which would be the landlord, not the tenant. And having been a landlord a lot, the landlord can control it if the landlord chooses to. But in a center where you're sitting vacant and you're begging folks, the landlord's going to collect the rent first and deal with anything else after he collects the rent. But it's certainly in a multi-use center, it's the landlord's responsibility, and code enforcement action would be taken against the landlord, not the individual tenant.
Commissioner, I would tell you that I think right now, if you write down 30A right now, you see sandwich board signs that are right in the right of way. We've had issues with people putting them in the right of way and we take them. If we include a limitation such as a 10-foot from 10-foot distance from the entranceway of that, I think you'll find they'll be pulled back closer to the actual business, not necessarily out on the main thoroughfare. So I think you'll see those having to be moved back toward the front doors of these businesses and not be out in clear view in places such as that.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of drove this whole thing was code enforcement and us chasing these sandwich board signs daily. Mm-hmm. I mean, our guys and ladies were out there every day, and it is unwieldy. And what's happening now is if you drive down, I drove down 38, there must be 150 sandwich board signs out there daily. I mean, they're there now. I think some kind of restriction that allows some kind of sandwich board sign restriction, so that when code goes out there, you can't have, like one of the restaurants, I won't name the name, but they have two out there every day. The next thing has 2 or 3, and the next thing. So what it would actually, from what's happening now, it would actually probably decrease the amount of sandwich board signs that are out there now, because you can chase these people all day long, and the next day it's out there again. And it got to be such a ridiculous rodeo that that Wayne and them started looking at, well, what if we allowed one per 150 feet? Or what if we allowed one 20 feet from the building, up from the front door, or something like that, so that when code goes out there and they see 2 or 3 sandwich board signs, stacked up on one restaurant, immediately they, no, you can only have one, and it's got to be out of the right of way. And I think it's actually going to clean up the problem, because we do have a problem now.
I think that's exactly right. When we limit the number you can have, it's clearly defined, much like the outside display. When things are clearly defined, where there's no ambiguity, it makes it much, much easier to enforce. I would envision if we had a chronic problem where someone was not complying with the ordinance, if it were to be passed, we would pursue the citation route, which means they go straight to the judge, or pay the fine and go straight to the judge. And so this is a method we feel like will be workable for us. Again, code enforcement, they're busy now. I mean, we got in this position because it was not very clear in the ordinance what a sign, what a sandwich board sign was. This is helping define it, narrow it down. I will remind you, they will be temporary, only during business hours. They'll be mobile. They can't be out there all day and all night. And so that's a temporary sign is what it amounts to.
Wayne, can I get you to clarify one thing for me?
Yes, sir.
In Section 3, Number 5, where it talks about non-conforming signs, it says it's to regulate and limit the continued existence of signs that were lawfully established prior to the effective date of this code but do not conform. So that means if somebody's got a sign up there now that doesn't conform, they're going to be allowed to continue to use it?
No, sir.
If we pass this?
No, sir. The sandwich board signs have never been allowed. They've never been legal. And so if they're not legal, you have no right to keep those.
My question is, we're gonna have to find a way to pay for one more code enforcement officer. I mean, we're gonna have to, Ms. Kanoski's right. There's no point doing any of this if we can't enforce it. I mean, it's, we're just spitting in the wind.
Well, Commissioner, I would tell you, we do have a code enforcement officer who started, this is the second week, I believe.
Yeah.
I think anything like this, you're going to have a learning curve. And then once the business owners become knowledgeable and understand the rules, I believe we'll have our instances of violations will go down. It's going to be a learning curve. We're going to have to stick a lot of manpower to enforce. But I think at the end of the day, I think we'll have it'll be cleaner and neater and than we have right now. And I think that's the key thing that we feel like.
Well, once you start sticking these people with fines, it don't take many fines to get their attention.
That's exactly right, Commissioner. And
that's
something
what
that
you're going to have to do.
That's right.
But if you have a $25 fine and my sandwich board sign brings in 10 people today and they spend $100 in my store, I just paid for the fine.
The fine goes up, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And also, if we have someone, if the citations are not working, we'll take them to the code board and then we'll start the other portion of the fining that we can to the code board action if we have to. So we have a dual method to take care of this. And if this is indeed passed or whatever the outcome of this is, we will be taking action on the code board issue, on the sandwich board sign issue.
I kind of like the they can't be closer than 150 feet apart. I mean, I think that sets it up where, you're not going to have one after the other. And you have a plaza, and most of the time the plazas are owned by, like you said, one owner. Most of the time they have a business association, owners association. But yeah, enforcement's a problem anywhere and any time on any issue. I mean, we have a lot of people who defy everything. They go, don't tell me what to do with anything. I mean, they're going to defy it. And right now, what we've got, if you go out there, is a mess. I mean, if you see it, it is a mess. So some of the signs are really big. Some of them have chalk writing on them. Some of them have, some of them are well made. Some of them, but this tells you exactly how tall they can be, what they have to look like, and how many feet apart they can be.
Ms. Kanowski.
As she comes up, I mean, I'm all in favor of small business. I've owned several in my lifetime, and I want them to thrive. But again, I don't want to lose the flavor that we have in South Walton either.
Thank you.
It's hard.
Well, unfortunately, I think if you drive down 30A, I think 30A has turned into we're all commercial. It's a commercial quarter. It's an enterprise zone. And I didn't think that 2 or 3 years ago, but now I do. I mean, it's very commercialized. I mean, it is very commercialized. Everybody's selling something. Everybody's trying to make money from the tourist for a short period of time. And I just think that it's no longer a sleepy little town with a 2-lane road where it's lovely. It's not.
Ms. Mary, your comments?
Mary Kanoski again for South Walton Community Council. There are different perspectives here that we're talking about based on logic. So the staff have just presented a perspective that if this ordinance is passed, because businesses are allowed one sign, code enforcement will be I'm better able to enforce it. You know, logic from my point of view is there is a law right now, and that's 0 sandwich signs, and it's been impossible to enforce it. So I don't understand why allowing 1 sign is easier to enforce than 0 signs. 0 tolerance to me is much more clear. But that's my opinion, and you have another opinion, and that's fine. So what I would ask is, why don't we start collecting some data? Why don't, instead of me trying to make an argument based on the logic I think makes most sense, and someone else who has a different opinion making an argument on the logic that he or she thinks makes most sense, why don't we start collecting data and take a waiting period and survey, for example, on 30A, how many sandwich signs are out there now? And then put the ordinance in effect and survey again how many sandwich signs are out there now. And the other evidence-based data we could collect is, do sandwich signs actually bring a benefit to a business? I'm not anti-business, but I would like to know, if I owned a business and I put a sandwich sign out there, is that bringing me a benefit or not? So I would just ask us to start thinking about making more evidence-based decisions rather than just on our different interests or different opinions. Thank you.
Come forward, ma'am. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out the emphasis has been on 30A, but the 30A scenic corridor also includes 83, 393, 283, and 395. So these will be allowed on those roadways as well. It's not just 30A.
Thank you. State your name for the record,
Yes,
please.
Betty Letcher, and along 30A, everything's right up on the road anyhow, and so when someone's driving along, they can see without signs out there, and I think you're just creating more problems for code enforcement that are overworked anyhow because they're doing all the things that are going wrong. So I really think on 30A, it is different from 98 and 331, that you just do away with them. That would be my thought, and then there would no more problems. So if there's one out, they definitely get fined for it. But if you put one, it's like you say now, there's 0, but there's so many out. So you just create more problems, and we need things that are like on the books and people know. So I thank you.
Okay.
One of the things too is, when I was commissioner before, what I've seen happen is when I was commissioner before, South Walton didn't have a commercial land use. You had to have a neighborhood, you had to have a plat or a recorded plat with a commercial lot. You had to have a existing commercial, or it had to be in your covenants and restrictions. Walton County changed that somewhere along the line. I don't think it was I think it was during the second term. Changed that where commercial zoning is now allowed in South Walton. And so what you're seeing is proliferation of commercial uses in South Walton to serve the community and the tourists. So what you're seeing, what I'm seeing as commissioner, working with Wayne and these guys, is the need to accommodate everybody, not only the local people who live here, the tourists that come in, the small businesses. Some of these businesses are on 30A, like take for instance the V. It's on 30A. Everybody knows where it is. But they put a sign out. It's there, 2 of them every night. Hors d'oeuvres, half price, 5 to 7. So, this is kind of what we're seeing. And the question is, do we want to accommodate these small businesses, or do we want to try to constantly be chasing after them? Because I guarantee you, they will not comply with something that says, you can't do it. I mean, we've just discovered that. It's just a given. It's a reality. It doesn't matter how many times code goes out there, because I deal with it every day. We're chasing them, and we're spending all of our time. So, in my opinion, if we give them some kind of requirement, code can say you can only have one, it can only be this big. It's better than going to them and saying, okay, everybody get rid of all your sandwich board signs and and, you know, we're not going to allow them. Then you're going to have, you know, a bigger problem, I think.
You're saying they're going to do it anyway, basically.
Well, they are now. I mean, if you look at it now, they are now. No matter if we go out there, send code out there and cite them and warn them.
And is this proactive as well? I mean, code enforcement drives by, he sees a sign, you know, it's not complaint driven.
Yes, ma'am.
Miss Betty, come forward, please.
Sandy Luchtefeld, I just have a question. Is there any language in there about the bike paths, that the sandwich boards have to be so far away from the bike paths for safety?
Well, Mac, if they, that's
They're prohibited on the
they're
bike.
prohibited on any kind of
Anything
bike.
other than pedestrians and bikes and those things that are allowed by state law for
Yeah,
due
it's
to
number.
disabilities are prohibited
Yeah.
on.
Was your question, though, how close to it, as opposed to
That's our question.
not being on it, but I think the question is there something that limits how close it can be?
Number 2. You can't block it or obstruct it. The safe use of sidewalks, bike paths, or building entrances.
I mean, the bike path is on public right of way.
On private property.
And then we have like Route 83 or 393, no bike path. And can you imagine sandwich boards along there where those bicyclists are trying to get down in traffic?
Okay.
In no circumstance would they be allowed on public right of way.
Right away. Correct. Ms. Moore?
I have a question. If we were enforcing the current ordinance where sandwich board signs are not allowed, what would be the consequence if we were enforcing it for a business who puts one out?
Wayne?
If y'all have seen these areas, we have hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of them. So first of all, you know, we would have to dedicate a tremendous amount of time on code enforcement. Right now, it'd be citations. Like I said before, just like any other violation, it'd be citations. We would issue them. If it's in the right-of-way, we currently remove them from the right-of-way. And then if we had someone who was a chronic problem, again, the code board would be the ultimate place to take them to gain compliance.
I think she's asking the fee, the amount.
I think the first offense, I think it's $50. Is that right? I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it's $50 for the first offense. And then second and third goes up after that.
Can we, and I know we recently adopted something, can we up that, or is there a state statute that won't allow us? Can we? I think 500 is a good number.
There are some limitations. I wish we had JC here because he knows the code enforcement provisions as well. If you desire, maybe at the second reading, if it does go forward, we can provide you with that information as far as potential ranges if you did want to look into increasing the fine.
Okay.
So I
People
think,
just
you know,
don't pay it.
if it's not being enforced, and even if it were being enforced, if the punishment is not, or whatever consequence is not large enough to be effective, then that could be part of the reason why they are proliferating. I am also a big supporter of small business. I want all of them to make it that are providing a good product and a good service. Businesses have a lot of ways to advertise and market, a lot. And most businesses will tell you, unless they happen to be one of the few businesses that is really, really monitoring, and it's hard when you're even really trying to collect the data of what is actually bringing a person into their business, they have no idea what advertising is working. I've heard people stand up at speeches and at business meetings and say, we don't know 95% what is working, so we do everything we can hoping that something sticks. And so that's what creates, just if unbridled, signs and people standing out with moving signs, doing dances and all that craziness, is because they're doing everything they can, and I admire that and I want them to succeed. But I also think that there is a large residential population here, and there is a large visitor population here, and we're all paying taxes in some sort of way, and we deserve some consideration too. When I drive down 30A and see, first of all, real estate for sale signs already everywhere. And then, every business has a building sign, and now we're looking at all these sandwich board signs. It creates visual clutter. Some people refer to signs as visual pollution. And there is an organization, it's called Scenic America, that is about reducing signage, reducing billboards, reducing all that, because it's visual pollution for people who have to be subjected to it. So I think it's important to balance the needs of businesses with the wishes and desires of the citizens in that area. That's what I think is so critical here. And yes, there are a lot more businesses than there were, but I don't want us to be driven by what the businesses are or are not doing. And there are areas like Hilton Head where there's virtually no signage and no outward appearance of what businesses are there, and the businesses make it and the people find them. And so I think you decide what you want to be, and then you create code and enforce that code to lead to what you want to be, versus letting those businesses dictate that by what they will and won't do. I guarantee you, if we, and I know it takes a lot. I know it takes a lot from code enforcement, but when there's a consequence for what someone's doing repeatedly, they'll alter their behavior. So I just encourage you to consider that as well.
Thank you.
Chairman, can I make a quick comment?
Please, quick.
Just to give you a little background, there's been a lot of talk about the current problem we have, and we do have a problem with sandwich boards. Just to give a little background, it may help clarify a few things for the board, is that over a period of years, the code is somewhat silent on sandwich boards. You won't find the term sandwich boards in the code. So it's somewhat silent, somewhat ambiguous. Over the years, have been several interpretations from different people that allowed the sandwich boards. And I think when you read it closely, I believe that sandwich boards are considered a portable sign, which is disallowed in the code. So that interpretation swing back and forth has allowed some of these sandwich boards to pop up and sort of, become more numerous. But I believe the current code does not allow them. It doesn't say no sandwich boards. It has different terms for it. But part of the problem is that through different interpretations, that's how we're in a position we're in now, because of the interpretations. We are, as always, we're looking to clarify it, to make it very clear what is and what's not allowed, and we feel like this particular ordinance does that.
What's the board's wishes?
Well, this is the first reading, did we
Yes,
say?
ma'am.
Yes.
First reading. Well, is the motion just to move it to the second reading, or is that?
Do we have to adopt it?
We do need to approve the first reading and set a second hearing, but you could certainly offer amendments to it, change it any way you want to. I would think.
At the second reading.
Well, if we have it tonight, we can prepare, if there are any amendments that the board seeks tonight, we could have that prepared and drafted for the second hearing, if there are those amendments and you do choose to go forward with it.
Let me ask a question, just for my mind. Can there be further limitations on who can have sandwich board signs? Can it be limited to, for example, maybe restaurants or whatever? Can it be narrowed? Somewhat? I just want it in my head.
That's a good question. I think it is a little tricky. I'll let Cindy answer that, but I think when you start allowing some and disallowing others.
I see her shaking her head, so never mind,
What we ought to do is maybe move it to the second hearing, but in the meantime, I would like some of these folks that are in the audience to go out and take an inventory of what's out there right now. Go into the store and talk to the people and, about the sandwich board signs. Just as a survey to see what they say about the sandwich board signs. I think the code, none of our violations cost that much money. I mean, we don't hit people with huge fines. It's just been part of the code. We didn't raise them, you know, I mean, it's, you know, you're going to pay the $50 and go on down the road. Now, the question is, you know, do we want to hit people with, you know, do we want to be a very strict, hit people up with fines, which, you know, I've tried to get people to behave for a long time. I've never been able to do it. I don't care how much you fine them and how many citations you give them. But I would like people to go out and look at what's happening, look at what's going on, and look at the commercial enterprises that are now 30A. Scenic Gulf Drive, I don't think they express their opinions.
They're all, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just so close in there.
Yeah.
You know, they're right up on the highway.
Yeah. But I think it's either all or none. I mean, we have to either totally do away with them and then go out and just scorched earth, everything goes. Now, are we going to do that? That's my question. Somebody calls in and goes, well, gosh, I had a thing. Are we going to do that? Scorched earth policy, no sandwich board signs, period. So we go out there and hit every business and tell them, take that sandwich board sign down. Or are we going to provide some mechanism where people can have a sandwich board sign under certain conditions? In my mind, that's kind of the question. And I've never seen the scorched earth, you know, absolutely nothing, you can't do this work here. I've never seen it. I've just, you know, people move here to disobey the rules, I think. You know, and it, you know, we could have 10 code enforcement officers out there, and we could fine them, you know, hundreds of dollars. They won't pay it. Then we have to lien them, and then it costs our attorney. So we have to spend money, which is why I think some version of a sandwich board sign is a good idea. But I would like to just move the sandwich board sign as it is forward to the second hearing and take more public comment. It would be nice to hear from some of the businesses. I notice they're not, you know, there's nobody here representing the businesses.
They're trying to make a living.
Huh?
They're trying to make a
living.
living.
And they'll tell you that they're working.
Commissioner, do you want to stay with the 20 feet, or do you want to change it to 10 from the front door of the business?
I can live with the 10. It's live with 20.
I'm gonna do it. I'd rather have 10.
Yeah, well, yeah, that as a proposal, yeah, that works. And then leave in the 150 feet. But I would like to take some more testimony from, and I would like some people to go out and just take a look at what we're dealing with. And some of these small businesses are in these places where there's a complex and the businesses are in the back. One example is Chanticleer Bakery, Chanticleer Restaurant. Now, if you drove down the road, you would not know that it was there. But if there is a sandwich board sign out with a big rooster you know it's there. So those kinds of businesses that are trying to make it in all these plazas and in the back, those are local people. They're trying to run small businesses, and they're trying to draw customers in. And I think that we've got to provide some mechanism for them to, as Ms. Moore said, to be successful without, over cluttering the roadways.
Okay. Can you go over your motion again?
Yeah, my motion would be to move it forward to second reading, to take more testimony, but to change the 20 to 10 and to leave the 150 feet apart at this point.
Okay, we got a motion?
Second.
And a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay.
Are we going to perhaps take this at a separate meeting, or are we going to try to do it all on the 10th?
We do need to set a date certain for the second meeting.
And on the previous one
Right.
as well. You approved it, but you didn't set a hearing date.
What dates we got?
I think we ought to say June 10th.
I believe we do need to do it on June 10th because I think that the hearing has to be after 5, the second hearing.
That's our regular board meeting. You think we'll go faster?
We can certainly review the planning commission agenda and may have this same meeting in the third Tuesday in June, even knowing that these will be heard on June 10th.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, so we need I guess a motion for a date certain for item number 5 for the second reading, so June 10th.
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. All.
Yeah, we didn't do a date
She said it had to be a
We just
date certain,
didn't
though, but I'll add that to that motion that it would be it would be, the second reading would be June 10th. Yeah. And the second hearing would be June 10th.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, if we could go back to number 4 and have a date certain for the second reading for item number 4.
Motion to set it for June the 10th after 5 o'clock or somewhere thereafter.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, do we have any other cleaning up on that?
No, sir, I don't think so. I'm sorry.
We got date certains on all 3 of those, correct? Okay, very well. All right, you got another one there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim Brown for the record. Okay, this is in the rest of the unincorporated area outside the scenic corridor. Again, the provisions are the same. It's just outside of the designated scenic corridors. And again, the Planning Commission recommend approving it, striking the 150-foot limitation and putting in 1 per storefront.
Okay, any public comments on that one? Come forward, sir. State your name for the record.
My name is Frank Wolf. I'm a resident of Freeport. I live approximately a couple miles north of the bay. I have addressed a couple of you about the man stated about what a business is, and we have a gentleman that moved in about 8 or 10 years ago, and they started with their yard sales, and the yard sales continued so often that we was under the impression that it is a business. Since that issue has not been discussed in the past 6 years, I've watched it grow worse and worse, that the man's now got 2 steel cargo containers in his yard. And if, as you drive home tonight, you'll see that they're setting up for a big Memorial Day yard sale again. My point, I'd like to add to the fact that I do know what a distraction one pizza sign or whatever you guys want to call it on each side of the road. When it happens as often as it does, and the distraction, you guys are talking so much about clarity and safety. You know, I do live on this highway that's going to be expanding, and I'm within 50 feet of it, and to see the distraction of the hazardous environment that it has created for myself and my neighbors on our road is something that you guys might want to think about, because if you're having this problem, like she said, down on 30A, she wouldn't realize how long ago. It don't take long when one person sees what they've been getting away with. I mean, he's manufactured his own product, he's stockpiled full of yard sale items, and now he's grown to storage containers in his yard. So I mean, he's right next to the road. What are you gonna, what kind of, you're saying no sandwich signs next to a business door front, for example. Well, he put his containers as close to the highway as you can ever get with the new part that's coming through. So I mean, you guys have brought up a lot of legit issues, about businesses. What is a business? I think this is a business. I live in a residential village, rural village. I've been in touch with code enforcement over the past 6 years, probably 12 times. Nothing seems to be getting directed about the problem. It only continues to grow worse.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dice.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we have here is a yard sale that was once really a yard sale that has migrated into maybe a full-scale business. We are aware that our shipping containers have been moved in recently, and we will have code enforcement go out and investigate this issue, because it's something it's one of those things that starts out as a legitimate yard sale, but over the years has migrated into collecting materials and selling materials, not typical yard sale type purpose, which is sporadic.
Okay, thank you. All right, what's the board's wishes on this one?
So outside the scenic corridors, would that mean, that would mean countywide?
That's the rest of the county.
The rest of the county, with the exception of Freeport and the
Yes,
city of
the rest of the
Defenia?
unincorporated area.
Okay.
Which is mostly north of the bay.
I think that the 331 corridor standards should address that. I mean, if you want them, yes. If you don't, if you want a limited amount, or if you want them, but you need to have some kind of idea about.
Does it not go up to Highway 20 or a corridor?
Unincorporated areas of the county, so it's anything outside the city of Freeport and the Funiac Springs city limits.
Okay. That's one thing that.
Right, we still got some discussion coming up, I believe, in the future concerning the 331 corridor standard, so I guess it could be an addition to that for consideration.
Right. I would say that instead of just the rest of the unincorporated area, that it would specifically be the 331 corridor that we've put
So
forward.
you want to narrow it just to the corridor and not 90 or 20 East or 81 or any of them? It wouldn't hurt my feelings if we just didn't have it at all anywhere north of the bay.
Well, I don't think we should even consider it this point until we adopt the 331 standards, right?
Yeah, because this
Yeah.
one kind of says, okay,
I think we should
cut them loose
do that
everywhere.
first. Adopt the 331 corridor standards, and then if we want to apply it everywhere else, but then 331 would have a set of standards.
Well, I thought we were taking 331 corridor and creating its own chapter, if you will.
Yeah, that's what I'm
for
saying.
this purposes, but
But if we adopt this, then we're including 331 in this.
that's
So why
correct.
wouldn't we wait and adopt the 331 corridor standards first, and then address sandwich boards everywhere else?
I would think if you want to address this on 331, that standard, the 331 corridor standards would be the appropriate place to do it if you choose to adopt it.
That's what I just said, I think.
I was agreeing with you.
Thank you, sir. You're agreeing with me?
And Commissioner,
Thank you, birthday boy.
we're not responding to a pressing request with this particular ordinance amending Chapter 7. We were just trying to address it across the board. So if you choose not to amend Chapter 7 to allow sandwich boards, that's
Well, we've already addressed just scenic corridors.
Right.
So opening it up to the rest of the county seems to me to be a little bit different than what we're talking about.
Okay.
I just rather wait until we do 331 corridor. What do you, Mr. Bell?
Yeah, I think we've already got some out on 90. We've got sandwich boards out there,
Yes.
even though they're not allowed. But yeah, I'd like to see the 331 standards done first, and then at that point in time, determine what we need to do for the rest of the county.
Okay.
So do we make a motion to not move this forward?
yes, ma'am.
All right, I will make that motion.
It could be,
Table it until.
So what you want to do,
Until
table
I-
it for now?
Yeah.
Is that your motion?
Not a time certain, just table it for now, yes.
Kenneth, you okay
Yeah.
with that? Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. I don't know how long it's taken. How about let's take about 5 minutes? We're getting old and the bladders ain't as good. Back to order. Oops, excuse me. We'll come back to order.
We've been here too long.
Okay, where we at?
I think we're on item number 8, and I'm presenting that.
All right, Mac, you got the floor.
Oh, no, that's me.
That's you. I'm sorry. Okay, Sid, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is simply an amendment to the current roadside fundraising ordinance that we have in effect. All it does, I believe, is add Scenic Gulf Drive and US Highway 98 to the ordinance. I think that's a typographical error in the memo.
It should be on 90,
It's 98.
98. Where you got that at?
Cover says 90.
But it's
That's a
98.
typographical error in the memo.
Typo.
I'm sorry, I didn't draft that. I think Mark did.
Why can't we
We can
include
raise
90?
money up there.
We could if y'all wanted to.
But it'd have to be a separate ordinance,
And-
correct?
And remember, it would not include the city of Defeniak where the problem
More
exists.
passenger, so you're.
Is it necessary to put in here Highway 98 and any intersection on US Highway 98? Because the state regulates those roads, don't they? And they don't allow it anyway.
I don't know the answer.
Don't
to that
know the
question.
answer.
Maybe we're being very thorough.
I
this
think
time.
we were, yeah, I think we were looking at, he had them all spelled out, and I said, well, just put it any intersection with Scenic Gulf Drive, any intersecting road, and any intersecting road on 98.
Yeah.
Because what people do is, once you turn off 98, it'll be right there, like on Geronimo or something.
Okay. Is there any public comment reference this? Seeing none, what's the board's
Motion to
wish?
approve.
Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay,
Do we not need to?
It's not an amendment to the land
All right,
development code.
that's right.
so
My mistake.
We just need the one hearing.
okay,
Mr. Chairman, the last two items we have on the agenda are quasi-judicial items, need to be sworn in.
Yes. If anybody anticipates testifying on any quasi-judicial item, if you'd stand and raise your right hand. Do you all swear or affirm that you will tell the truth before this board? I'm sorry.
I do.
Thank you.
okay, just remind anybody coming up to testify, be sure to identify yourself by name for the record.
Mr. Chairman, the first item is number 9 on your agenda, Dixie RV Service Building. I'll ask Mac to give a quick overview of this project.
Commissioners, this is an application submitted by Preble Rish on behalf of Another Weekend LLC, the owner of the Dixie RV Center at Mossy Head. They're proposing to add a 16,000 gross square foot RV sales and service building to the existing facility at Mossy Head, which is the old Lucky 13 truck stop. The parcel is a little over 20 acres with a future land use of industrial. And by and large, this building is going to be located on an area that's already an impervious surface, which further reduces the impact on this particular project. With regard to the activities that will be conducted in this building, they're largely servicing and customizing Class A RVs on this site. They're already doing this work now. They just would like to be able to do it inside a building. We don't see any significant transportation impact because most all of these vehicles will be coming off of I-10 and then exiting the facility back to I-10.
Mac, that's located there in that, I guess it'd be the southwest corner of that.
Yes,
parcel?
sir. The darker area is the drainage basin that's been identified. The white area in the center of that is actually the building itself that's proposed. And just immediately to the left of that is a stormwater facility that is sized to handle that drainage basin that's in the darker area there.
Okay. I think, Chance, you had a meeting with Mr. Jennings from out there, and according to what he told me a few minutes ago, y'all satisfied all of his concerns concerning water?
Yes, sir. Chance Powell, for the record, I have been sworn, and I am the agent, engineer for the agent on this, not working for the county. But the Planning Commission requested that Greg Graham and I both go out and meet with Mr. Jennings because he had some concerns that were brought up at the Planning Commission meeting. We met out there with him yesterday, and a big part of his concern was already addressed in the design. And what it is that darker shaded area that you see there is actually, they're going to resurface that area with new asphalt. And currently, where the new asphalt meets the old asphalt at the far, at the southeast corner of that new asphalt there's a flume there that sort of just dumps the water off of that parking lot out into, across that road that runs along the south there, which is Green Acres Road, correct? And what we're doing is we're adding a new type F curb, which is a high back curb, all the way along that south edge of the new asphalt, which will capture that runoff, not allow it to go out on Green Acres Road, and convey it over to the stormwater facility.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Another issue that Greg had brought up that you saw in the comments that we located yesterday was the monitoring well that he thought may be in the stormwater retention area. It's actually shown at the northwest corner of the stormwater facility. It's just not labeled on the survey, but we noticed it, but it's not in the stormwater facility. So it
Okay.
could be a problem.
Is there any public comments? Seeing none?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, last item on the agenda is number 10, South Walton Commerce Park. It's Brian Underwood to come up and give a brief presentation.
Good evening, Brian Underwood, Planning and Development Services. This is a major development order application submitted by ECM requesting the approval to develop two 6,500 square foot commercial warehouse buildings with office space. One of the buildings is actually 7,000 square feet, the other is 6,000 square feet. On a 1.05 acre site with future land use of business park. Project is approximately 7 miles east of US 331 and US Highway 98 intersection on Saranoa Road. There are no known code violations on the subject property. Unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the project will be consistent with the Walton County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code when the conditions and comments stated below are met. There's one condition of approval as shown on page 7. Prior to commencement of the development, the developer must provide a copy of the NPDES Notice of Intent along with the required stormwater pollution prevention plan in accordance with section 15.05.00 of the Land Development Code. I believe Mr. Barnhill is present to represent the applicant.
Does the applicant have anything to say, Mr. Barnhill?
Darrell Barnhill, have been sworn in representing the owner. As Brian said, there's no outstanding issues. We're building a commercial building inside of an industrial park. But that's about it.
Is there any public comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. We stand, that it?
Yes, sir. That's it.